Welcome, everyone, to another Arcview Access program. We're so thrilled you could join. Arcview Access spun out of a need for community building and education when 2020 came about, changing our ability to get together in real life and giving us a new tool for networking, connection, and most importantly, learning about our incredible industry one corner at a time. Before we begin, we want to quickly run down the wider Arcview ecosystem for those who may not be familiar. Under the Arcview Group's umbrella rests 4 different units, each uniquely positioned to support our growing industry from the ground up. Arcview Capital handles your financial needs as a FINRA registered broker and now includes a crowdfunding platform. The Ventures team is the principal investing group, managing our unique collective fund made up of 78 members, and they call the shots. The consulting team is your portal to scaling and building your business no matter the size, handling state expansion down to licensing and valuations. Last up, Arcview Events and Experiences, who partnered with McVeigh Global Meetings and Events in a joint venture to bring you this webinar today and to make our in-person events incredible, like the inspiring and empowering WIN event in LA last week. This is also thanks to our strategic alliance partners, all cannabis professionals with great resources for our sector. Do you need banking services? PayQuick can bank the entire supply chain of cannabis companies, from growers to dispensaries to ancillaries and everything in between. Need a strong law firm? Ice Miller. Financial services firm? Green Growth CPA. Insurance company? Alpha Root. Need payroll and 401k services? Call our friends at Work. Management consulting and executive search firm? Waterton Partners and North Star Financial Consulting Group. My name is Erica El-Halali, and I was born and raised in the Midwest, including living in Nebraska, South Dakota, and Minnesota, where I got my MBA from the University of Minnesota. Go Gophers. I grew up being terrified of getting caught with cannabis, and because I would lose my financial aid eligibility. As states in the Midwest expand their cannabis programs, adult use and medical, it feels like a new day for cannabis in the Midwest. And I'm very happy to host this Midwest town hall today. I came to the cannabis industry from traditional banking and technology, and I serve our clients nationwide at PayQuick as the head of account management. This includes customers in Michigan and Illinois. It's a passion of mine to help cannabis companies get much needed banking services and a personal mission to get as much cash out of the cannabis ecosystem and bring it into the 21st century of electronic payments, including ACH, wires, bill pays, and our very own Quick Pay network that allows our members to instantly transfer funds between each other, safer, cheaper, and faster than transporting cash. Additionally, we have an entire partner network that helps you with all of your financial needs, including lending, payroll, merchant services, and more. Please check us out at payquick.com. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Rebecca Collette, CEO of Collexium, who will be leading the conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you for the amazing introduction, Erica, and for all that insightful information. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Arcview Midwest Town Hall. I'll introduce myself a little bit before we get into our amazing panelists. My name is Rebecca Collette. I'm the CEO of Collexium. Collexium is a Michigan-based, women-owned cultivation and processing brand. I also have the pleasure of doing many things in the cannabis industry to advance diversity and inclusion. So let's get a little bit into our panelists. I'll introduce them. Ironically, we have 3 J names today, so that's exciting. First up, Jess. Jess, can you come on screen, introduce yourself, just tell us a couple of things about your experience in the cannabis industry and what state you're representing.
What up, though, y'all? I'm Jess. I'm from Detroit. I'm representing Copper House Detroit today, but I also wear a lot of hats within the industry surrounding social equity, diversity, and inclusion. And Copper House Detroit is a love story. During my European engagement to my wife, Cara, who's pictured there, we stayed in Airbnb because I was a teacher and she was a student. And we needed to save money and have travel be accessible. And what we learned in that experience was that short-term rentals get to be not only a economy, a source to boom the local community economy through offering space for tourists to come into those environments. It also gets to be a community ambassador. And so we took our experience from Europe and captured it into our home. We wanted to enter the industry, but as you know, there are high barriers to entry, i.e. cost and money to play in the game. And we were able to use what we have to start a model. And we were the first in Detroit. So our space offers overnight accommodations for cannabis consumers that are coming to Detroit. We also offer intimate gatherings for the industry and consumers, and we do lifestyle content production out of our space for brands and businesses.
Thank you, Jess. Jack, welcome. Can you give our community a little bit of insight about your work in the cannabis industry and what state you're representing?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca. My background is very traditional corporate finance and investment banking for the most part. I've spent about 15 years in those 2 fields. I've spent the past 5 years specifically in cannabis. I work for North Star Financial Consulting Group. We come in and we handle all the bookkeeping and accounting functions, along with financial planning for clients in the cannabis space. And prior to that, I spent 3 years out in Oklahoma, which is the state besides California I'm most familiar with, and we built out a large-scale cannabis operation. I served as CFO for a company called Redbird Bioscience, which today is the largest cultivator in the state. We ended up raising and deploying about $25 million to build out what is today a very successful company with about 250 employees.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Oklahoma in a little bit. And lastly, John, can you give our community a little bit of taste of your experience in the cannabis industry and what states you're representing?
Well, thank you, Rebecca. So I'm not from the state up north. I'm from Ohio. So I know we were talking about our football relationships earlier, but I'm based out of Columbus. I'm a partner with the Ice Miller Law Firm. And I'm also a local official. I've been a local official for 17 years, so really engaged on politics and working that side of it. But I started out as a gaming attorney, and we've done gaming a lot. Our firm, 17 different jurisdictions. And when cannabis came live, right, it was basically gaming 2.0, right? So I morphed my practice, and we've got a national cannabis practice where we've got 30 professionals that were based out of 6 states, including the District of Columbia, but we're working throughout the nation with a big footprint in the Midwest, representing clients. And I guess one of my recent claims to fame is that we're the author of the Ohio adult use proposal. So we can talk about that today, but we're very involved in kind of the turning things from medical to adult or creating programs. So very excited, really a great group of panelists, and thank you to Arcview for the opportunity to be part of this today.
And thank you, John. And thank you to all of our panelists, the 3 J's, ironically. Let's get into some exciting conversation. So, John, I want to kind of start with you. I know you just mentioned a little bit of the Ohio program. So I wanted us to just get into a little bit of update. Ohio is definitely one of the states that everybody is watching and everybody is excited about. So can you give us a bit of update on what's going on in Ohio?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Happy to do that. So, Ohio is really an emerging state, right? It's a medical program currently. It's been that way since Governor Kasich signed legislation in 2016. But the medical program is strong. We've got currently two regulators, the Department of Commerce and the Pharmacy Board, that are providing the oversight. But you're really starting to see things turn. If in the legislature, there is a bill, Senate Bill 261, to modernize the qualifying conditions, modernize the regulatory program so you have less government, maybe just one agency over the program. So I think in the fourth quarter, that bill, it's passed the Senate. I think it has a good chance to pass in the House in lame duck in the fourth quarter. So, that's going on. There's also a bill in the legislature, House Bill 498, that would create, Jamie Callender's a sponsor, a great guy in the education space as well, but he is trying to create adult use. I don't think that the legislature is Republican based legislature. I don't see that passing. So there's an initiative right now in Ohio under the Ohio Constitution. You have the ability to go get signatures, like a lot of states, right, to put something on the ballot. So our firm has been the leading law firm. We drafted the petition, working with the team. We collected the signatures. We've gone through every bit of the process. And then, of course, it's cannabis, right? What happens? There's litigation, right? We'll talk about Illinois later. And in that litigation, we agreed to not put it on the ballot till November of 2023. So that is coming. We've got great regulators. We've got good leadership in Ohio. The people are making money. It's a control state, right? So I think it's a nice mix of number of licenses, I think, for the market. And I think one of the two biggest changes that I've seen is the pharmacy board. It just awarded there's currently on top of the current licenses, 70 new dispensaries were just awarded that have to be operational in about 270 days. So, we represent about 10 of the 70. Everyone's working on all the blocking and tackling, the zoning, setting things up, and unlike my last statement, there has been no litigation yet on the dispensaries, which is kind of rare for cannabis. It was a lottery system. And I think because they followed Illinois in the lottery, right? Illinois had a lottery system. A lot of states are shifting. I don't think there's pros and cons, but some states are shifting to a lottery model to avoid litigation. Did not work in Illinois, right? That just got resolved. But in Ohio, so far, so good. I think they will get sued, but I think it's more on I was disqualified and here's why, and all that. So that's a big expansion. I think in the adult use proposal, we really try to watch what was going on with our neighbors, right? Because you got to make sure you're following. We've got two great speakers here from Michigan, right? I think making sure that we understand what's going on in the Michigan market. Watching Indiana, I think that's going to be hot and heavy next year. We're working in PA. We're kind of working in all the surrounding states. So I think that's exciting. Then my final thought is the state is also allowing an expansion of cultivation space. So you're able to go. There's two levels of cultivators, level 1 and then a level 2. The level 1 can go from 25,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet, and a level 2 from 3,000 to 6,000. But you have to be in operations for a year. There's qualification. So I think they're really the state is doing a good job understanding supply and demand and meeting that accordingly. So appreciate the opportunity to share a few perspectives on Ohio.
Awesome, John. Thank you for that amazing update. So I just wanted to touch base really quick on the cultivation side. So are there going to be opportunities in Ohio for cultivators, for instance, that want to come in under 25,000 square feet?
There are, right? And I think, one of the things we may get to is, social equity, right? I think that is, that's super important to me and our firm. And so, yes, there's a level 2 where people can have 3,000 to 6,000 square feet, though that's a cheaper barrier to entry. They haven't expanded the number yet, but in the adult use proposal that's pending, we drafted a very strong social equity program for Ohio, and I would say that the leadership under Governor Kasich at the time, they tried to have a good social equity program. They had a preference system in place, but it was ruled to be unconstitutional. And so we redrafted it in the adult use proposal. We spent some time understanding the law and the Constitution, federal, state, and drafted in a way that we think will pass constitutional muster. So we created opportunities for social equity in cultivation, in kind of like what Illinois did. And frankly, when we drafted it, we kind of modeled after Illinois, like 5,000 square feet. We kind of looked at some of the good things because Illinois has a very good social equity program. So there is some entry points beyond the big major mega facilities.
Awesome. Because I know we have a robust group in our audience, so they may be interested in different areas of the industry. So thank you again for that robust update about Ohio. So let's talk about Ohio's neighbors, specifically one that is my favorite, Michigan. Hailing from Detroit, Michigan, I think doesn't get enough praise for being a trailblazer in the cannabis industry. However, more recently, there has been a bit of controversy around a few topics. So I wanted to talk about a couple. One, potency inflation. More recently, especially within the last year, we've had a lab or two under a bit of scrutiny about their test results and the validity of their test results. And then also, it's just caused a lot of maybe distrust with the consumer market. And then also operators have a lot of distrust. So what does this really mean for consumers in Michigan who are shopping at retail, who are looking at hospitality opportunities in Michigan? Jess, my other Michigander on the call, what do you think about what's going on in Michigan in regards to all of this craziness around lab and potency? What do you think?
I think that there are multiple perspectives, like you brought up, Rebecca. There's the operator perspective. And I would say that from an operator perspective, we are in an echo chamber, right? We're very in tune with what's happening with our regulators, with what our oversight and enforcement looks like, right? Like there's a lot of concern and a lot of lack of trust with our regulators and our labs, right? I would say that the average consumer, based off of who I see that comes through Copper House, and this year we've served 1,400 guests through events and overnight bookings. The market is robust. And we're not yet fully mature. And we see that our market is maturing as we see more acquisitions from large business, like large companies acquiring these smaller companies. As we've become more mature, like the consumer, the education level is going to heighten. But I would say that the market is very diverse in terms of what consumers are even paying attention to. I have consumers that they're used to shopping with the plug, right? So when they come and they're shopping at dispensaries, they don't know what to look for when they go in there. They're looking for entry-level education. And honestly, they might use THC potency, but we know as experienced consumers that that's not actually the best qualifier for good flower, right? We want to know more about terpene profiles and flavonoids and things like that. And then we have the market that is more mature, more in tune and tapped in with what's happening in the industry. And yes, they're the ones that are critical of our labs not failing product, right? And then those products being put back on shelves through some sort of remediation process. And they're highly critical of that process and have a lot of distrust in our regulators because of that. But I don't think that there is one trend in the market right now. I think that consumers are in multiple places. There are folks who are learning how to shop for cannabis don't know what to look for and are just learning what THC potency even is. There are folks who are very highly experienced, and I say us in the industry are in an echo chamber. We're talking about the same things with one another. We are very conscious of these issues, but I don't think that that's reflective across the whole market. In fact, I wouldn't say it's even the majority of the market that are cannabis consumers.
Yes, I definitely have similar views on a lot of what you just said. I'm speaking about just the different perspectives in the cannabis industry. I think that leads to education is so important. That's one of the reasons Arcview has these events to educate the different communities in the cannabis space. And another way to educate people is through hospitality in cannabis. So Michigan is a strong cannabis market, and hospitality is something that's very, very new in the Michigan space. So can you give our community a bit of update on what's going on with hospitality in Michigan? Is there an update?
Yeah, so there's not really like regulation for specifically what we're doing. We're doing private residence, short-term rentals, and this is like what we would say is the gray areas still, right? But I would say where we're taking a lead on is around infused meals and cooking with cannabis. So at first, the way that the CRA, which is our cannabis regulatory agency, they took a stance of no, it has to be shelf stable, it has to have preservatives in order for it to be infused. But now they have loosened some of those requirements and allowed for, as long as there's like FDA, as long as there's safe serve, like qualifications, they're starting to look at that hospitality as an industry. And Michigan is actually one of the first states to have a Michigan Hospitality Industry Association, Michigo. And so we see a lot of things popping up, whether it be experience design from concerts, galleries. We even have like some concert venues hosting having a smoke lounge hosted by some of the larger cannabis companies, to more and more bed and breakfasts coming online, right? And resorts coming online. And so I think that the regulatory climate is not there yet, but as more and more opportunities present themselves, I just presented to the CRA in April, and they're like, don't mention that yet. We'll have something that we're releasing soon. So I imagine there's going to be more increased regulation. We try to align what we did in our basement expansion, which was funded by Cannabis for Black Lives. We followed the social consumption HVAC requirements to make sure that the space is safe for consumption, but there's not a lot of regulation right now. I imagine there will be soon though, as more and more folks come online.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. Yes, as more and more cultivators come online, dispensaries, people need safe spaces to consume cannabis and to have fun with it. So I imagine we will get our ducks in a row soon, just like the West Coast. Awesome. Thank you. Jack, let's talk a little bit about, we're still talking about Michigan a little bit, but a little bit earlier this year, one of the largest cannabis companies in Michigan, Flourish, raised one of the largest amounts to date of $48 million. Can we speak about what this means, if anything, in regards to banking in cannabis? I've never really seen a cannabis company raise this amount. I mean, we're seeing all these mergers and acquisitions, we're seeing all this money thrown around, but then safe banking. So does this mean anything for banking in cannabis? Have you heard anything? Let's talk about the money now.
Absolutely. And I do deal with a lot of fundraisings and initial offerings for cannabis companies. And actually, I wanted to ask you, Jess, a question on that topic. I've got a client out in the East Coast in Massachusetts who's been very successful in the past by specifically doing infused dinners for investors, many of whom have no experience with the cannabis industry whatsoever. They don't even really understand the products in many cases. It's been a very good model for him, but he's only done it on a private basis. I'm actually curious as to whether you've seen demand for that, or you've worked with companies that have been interested in raising money through an infused dinner that you might collaborate on.
I have not done it as a crowd raise yet, but I'm always open to raising fund. I'm looking at different properties right now to expand the model. So that's a good idea. But yeah, we've done elevated dinners. That was actually one of the first offerings that we had. We had Enid, who is with Lucky Pistol Catering. She's Michigan top infusion chef. And she started out of Copper House and was offering infused dinners. And I tell everyone, I met everyone I needed to meet in cannabis in the living room of my home. So I currently work as the Director of External Affairs and Social Equity at Common Citizen, which is the largest vertically integrated cannabis producer in the state. And I met the team at Copper House because they hosted an elevated dinner.
Very nice. I've done a number of investor presentations over the past 2 years for clients that I work for. And often, I'd say overwhelmingly, even the first question we get asked when people come in is, do you have any samples that you can pass out? And any presenter that has samples that they can leave behind for clients to try, even people that we wouldn't expect. I mean, one of the things that we saw when Oklahoma first opened up its medical market in 2018 was just tremendous demand for these products among older consumers. The average age in Oklahoma when I left Redbird, the company I was working for, among consumers was 44 years old. There was a lot of enthusiasm for these products. Many of them consumers that had never tried cannabis in the past. But sorry, Rebecca, to speak to your question, banking reform is so critically important in our industry. Capital is extremely expensive, as we're all aware. It's challenging to find a lending partner that doesn't charge exorbitant rates. I mean, I work with a number of clients that take advantage of factoring services, for example, which are very useful for providing operating capital, but they are essentially as expensive as just putting invoices on a credit card. I mean, on an annualized basis, they'll charge 25, 28% annual interest. It's extraordinarily expensive. And we need to see some sort of safe banking legislation pass Congress. Until it does, we're going to continue to see cannabis companies that are just extremely hamstrung in their ability to grow. The only avenue for raising public capital, of course, is listing on a Canadian or a foreign exchange. It's challenging to raise private capital in any circumstances. So I think this would be a tremendous opportunity. We see banks that are putting their toe into the space. I personally work with a bank on the East Coast that's very interested in expanding their lending services to cannabis clients. But they still, when I say put a toe in the space, they want to back clients that have real estate or other hard collateral equipment that they can provide financing against. As soon as we saw some kind of safe banking legislation, even if we didn't do away with the 280E adjustment, even if we're not talking about federal deregulation or federal legalization in any aspect, it would lower the cost of capital to such a degree in this industry that it would make it so much easier for new operators to enter the space, to raise money, and to actually have the ability to grow without essentially giving away the farm every time they raise money.
Yes, and as we know, I'm pretty sure everybody on this call can attest to, I guess maybe the biggest barrier to entry in the cannabis space is capital, because you can use money for many things. Jack, the Oklahoma market has been, I mean, I've heard many positive, many negative things. It's oversaturated. There's not many more opportunities there. Can you give us an update on what's really going on in Oklahoma? Is it really the wild, wild west in regards to cannabis? Or, I mean, what's really going on there?
You know, John talked earlier about preparing legislation or working on legislation for some of the other states, and Oklahoma was really the exception in that I think the permissibility of the cannabis industry, the legalization of medical cannabis, caught most of the politicians by surprise. They weren't expecting it in 2018 when it happened. And as a result, we essentially saw cannabis, medical cannabis, be legalized before there were really any rules or regulations in place. I moved out there in mid-2018, right after they legalized medical cannabis, and the initial rules governing the industry, governing retail, distribution, manufacturing, processing, everything, it was 12 pages long. That was the entire legislation that governed every aspect of the industry, and there were a lot of open questions. So it was very much like the Wild Wild West. They issued licenses to almost anyone. It was a $2,500 check, basically, that had to clear in order to qualify for a license. And Rebecca, just to give you an example, I did a lot of work also in Arkansas, the neighboring state. They have roughly the same population. It's about 4 million people in each state. Today, Oklahoma has more than 5,000 cultivation licenses issued. It is a very competitive environment. And there's almost as many dispensary licenses that have been issued too. Arkansas, by comparison, has less than 10 cultivation licenses. They have 6 that are active today, and they have about 40 dispensary licenses that are active. So the result is you see cannabis prices that are about 2 to 3 times as high in Arkansas, which is nice for the handful of operators that are able to get a license, but it's really difficult for the patients or the other people, the consumers that actually rely on these products. I'm actually a fan of more open licensure environments. I think it's better for the end consumers of cannabis products, and it's something I hope that we move towards in the future in other states.
Yeah, John, did you want to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always good opposing views, right? And I think, Jack, there's a lot of merit. I mean, I think you got to balance the patients versus the other side of it, right? And I'm more of a fan of a control state model, right? And there's pros and cons to both, but I think the most important thing that I care about for this industry is integrity. Um, I spoke to the National State Treasurers Association about a week and a half ago, right? And talking about if you're creating programs or the Safe Banking Act or things that you're looking at, and if we don't have integrity in this industry, right, we're in trouble, right? So I think if you go too far with too many licenses, the margins change, people are cutting corners, the quality is different, things are going out the back door, you're feeding the black market. And so I think we got to be really careful. I think control state, you get a little more quality. I think you get better patient delivery and more controls, because a regulator in Oregon or California or some of these states, or even Michigan has more licenses than Ohio. Each state is different. It's harder to regulate when you have that many licenses. So maybe some states are too limited, some are too far, but I think we've got to find a balance and have a little bit more control.
Yes, thank you for your perspective, John. And I was just going to add, from a cultivator's perspective in Michigan, where cultivators and processors are uncapped, I can tell you that this does it does a number on operators, especially when the price per pound cuts in half within the last 8 months, 6 months. Like that in itself, when you talk about the smaller boutique operators, can really cause a challenge when you talk about margins and even, payroll and keeping people hired during this recession time, bear market time. So I'm definitely a fan of a mid ground. Whatever we can decide is in the middle, not too controlled, to allow opportunities for smaller operators of colors to come on board, but not the wild west where everybody can grow and the price per pound is $200 one day. Who can keep the lights on with that? So thank you for that perspective. I wanted to jump a little bit into another topic and then leave some room for some discussion. So diversity and inclusion, very important in the cannabis space. Jess, Michigan, the state of Michigan and several municipalities have their social equity programs. Are they working, or are you seeing maybe other states that Michigan perhaps can start to model their programs a little bit after to improve? What are you kind of seeing in the Midwest, specifically Michigan, in regards to social equity and diversity and inclusion?
Well, personally, no. It's the needle isn't moving, right? Like, we see the same number of social equity qualified businesses in operation. It's not increasing. We're not increasing access. So the intention behind social equity is to create pathways and bridges for certain populations to have increased access to this industry. In Michigan, we can't even address what those real socially impacted populations are, right? We have a affirmative action ban. We can't talk about race. And my personal opinion is social equity needs to benefit brown and Black folks. We're 10 times more likely to be criminalized. The access for us, like, we only have 4% of ownership in this industry. We can't say that though, right? And so, no, I don't. And then also the state, they're better this year, right? They just released the gold standard award for social equity programs, but there was no standards for what social equity looked like. There were discounts for social equity qualified businesses and a requirement for adult use licensees to have a social equity plan. But I've gone through every published social equity plan, and some of them are like I'm going to hire from the community wherein I'm situated. Is that not just good business practice? Don't you want your staff on time? Like is that really social equity? And so they had nothing to even teach people what social equity could look like. And now we have a standardization process. So I think that will maybe inspire folks to do more racial justice work in there. So the gold standard award is for folks that are prioritizing communities of color in their social equity program. But again, it's not like a requirement, it's just an incentive. And so I think that any social equity program that is able to communicate that there's a priority to support communities that have been disenfranchised, over criminalized, and quite frankly, like excluded intentionally from all capitalist play, but especially within the cannabis industry, are the ones that are doing it better. I think that we need to acknowledge the real root cause here. We're not really paying attention, or we're avoiding it. Midwest is really comfortable around not talking about race and racial inequality. And we have to pull the veil back and be real about what's happening and what we're talking about when we say social equity and what that should mean.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with a lot what you just said. John, from your perspective, in a different state, a regulator standpoint, an attorney standpoint, are you seeing social equity work anywhere? I know you said you did a little bit of research in the Illinois market. Are you seeing anything kind of really work, really move the needle, so operators of color are actually operating successfully?
You know the motto, money talks and something else walks, right? And I think what I was reminded about a week and a half ago, I was talking to one of the policy advisors for the treasurer in Illinois, right? And I forgot about their program, right? They're one of the few states that actually puts money into social equity, right? They have a loan program, right? That real dollars are going in to support the businesses. And Jack did such a good job talking through, the capital and those issues. And if you don't have capital, if you don't have startup costs or tax abatements, or that's another thing we need to talk about is tax abatements, right? Because this is an industry that's driving revenue, it's driving jobs. But I think that is the key to success. And when the Ohio adult use proposal, we kind of modeled it after Illinois. But we made it better, right? So what we did is we took the taxes that are going to be derived from adult use, and we dedicated revenue for social equity, right? Because Jess talked really well about the discrimination, right? There was the war on drugs really hurt certain parts of our population much worse than others, right? And I think recognizing that, we put together a qualification program which gives a preference, but also business loans and dollars that can help people to succeed. Because I grew up with a single mom, didn't have a lot of assets. I had to work my way up the chain. But a lot of people who had capital early on in life, they have a bigger opportunity. They can take jobs, they can take risks, right? But a lot of people can't, right? And I think having that type of government funding is super helpful.
And I want to.
No.
Organizations can be doing that too. So comment, I would be remiss if I don't talk about the program from comment, but we have 100% of our profits go into our community reinvestment program, and we're prioritizing communities that have been disproportionately criminalized and redlined. So if you don't know anything about redlining, it's Black and brown communities, right? And so like businesses can be doing that too, reinvesting their profits. And so I think that social equity programs need to be putting a pressure on these organizations that are making lots of profit to reinvest into social equity applicants. And then we also have a diverse supplier program where we're prioritizing diverse suppliers to get through our supply chain. Rebecca.
Awesome. Jack, go ahead.
Just one quick comment on this subject. I already
knew you had something to comment.
I am pretty opinionated. But I live in San Francisco today. I moved here from Oklahoma, and obviously it's a notoriously progressive city. But I will say San Francisco has what I think is one of the more effective social inclusion programs in place around the country. And I have a client out here, in fact, that was able to just recently secure a $100,000 loan with a very low interest rate. It was about 2% a year, directly from the city of San Francisco. So I agree with John that lack of access to capital is, in my opinion, one of the greatest factors that prevents more diversity in this industry and more diverse ownership in this industry. And measures like the one that San Francisco has put in place to directly provide financing to diverse businesses, I think is something that actually fundamentally moves the needle in a way that less concrete policies may not do.
Yes, exactly. Access to capital. We can really end it there with social equity. So we have about 10 minutes left in the discussion, and I wanted to pivot it a little bit to talk about opportunities in the cannabis space. So as we're seeing a lot of states come online. We're seeing a lot of medical states now adopt adult use programs. But then we're also seeing that there's oversaturation of some licenses. Maybe perhaps there's oversaturations of retailers or cultivators and more opportunities for other licenses. So I wanted all of us to really kind of touch base on where we see opportunities in the industry. Is there a specific state, or perhaps, Jack, in Oklahoma, are you seeing, yes, it's the oversaturation of cultivators, but there's opportunities for more safety compliance facilities? Where are you seeing the opportunities? Jack, can we start with you?
Honestly, the most appealing opportunities geography-wise that I'm seeing are in New England. I know this is about the Midwest, but there are some really exciting emerging markets out there. But in terms of function, above and beyond the opportunities in the cannabis space directly, there's so many for the ancillary businesses that support this space. I mean, all three of us, Jess, John, and myself, we work in professional services businesses that support cannabis operators. And there is just so much demand for these services without a lot of specialization. There's not a lot of, for example, attorneys that focus on this space. There's not a lot of hospitality operators that focus on this space. It is a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of a rapidly growing industry without needing to squeeze into an increasingly competitive market as an operator.
I was clapping my hands when you were talking, Jack, but I was on mute. I think there is an immense opportunity for just more diversity in the ancillary services. I can tell you as an operator myself, with certain functions, we really just have one or two options. That's it. It's not much diversity in regards to the supply chain. John, any perspective on this, especially coming from a different area of the country?
I tend to have analogies for stuff, right? This is kind of baseball, right? The game is just getting good. We're in probably the third inning, and there's just a lot of growth ahead, right? And I think if you look around, New York is a tremendous opportunity, right? That program is really going to skyrocket. A lot of RFPs coming out. And frankly, there's a tremendous amount of social equity preference in New York, right? They're really, the governor has made that a priority for the early rounds. I think that's exciting. South Carolina failed this year, which is, I kind of talk about, going to, blue and red states, right? Cannabis is a blue state start, right? Now, when you see it going into red states, right, it's really kind of becoming a green state, right? It's kind of about the dollars and the revenue. But South Carolina, I think, gets it done next year, right? I think Kentucky, I think it's the Senate President Stivers, I think, needs to be convinced, and I think it can happen in Kentucky, right? I think that's a real opportunity. A sleeper is Indiana. Indiana, they've got a study committee going on over the summer. I know we're actually, we've got a very heavy national lobbying group. We're working in multiple states. So I think Indiana is one to watch. Ohio with adult use, I think will pass in 2023. And there's just we're just seeing kind of the floodgates. And where another factor that I kind of pay attention to is the economy, right? You talked about the inflationary issues in Michigan with the economy dipping nearer a recession. I think once state revenues decrease and we get a little bit of a reset in the economy, that's going to be another boon. And Jack really did a great job on the Safe Banking Act. That is once we get actual real capital into the space, then you're going to see even greater growth.
Awesome. Jess, any perspective on opportunities?
Well, I think we kind of touched on one, right? Like folks are not trusting our labs, and there are quite few labs in Michigan. So if you wanted to operate in the regulated industry, which regulation changes all the time, we're experiencing the lowest price per pound, like money, capital is low in the industry. But if you want to play in the regulated industry, labs and transporters, there's a need there, specifically for diverse owned labs and transporters. And then I think that there are lots of ancillary opportunities, like one, data and tech. We don't have the most robust marketing data, and folks honestly are just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. So like folks who are really have a high level of expertise in that could really thrive here. I started a social media company and was able to make 6 figures within 6 months because the industry needs that support. And then hospitality. The folks are, yeah, we can buy weed, but what do we do when we have it? How are we convening together? What does the experience design look like? If I'm traveling to Michigan to participate in the recreational market, how can I consume in my hotel? How can I consume in my homestay? Where can I go to get infused dinner? And where is the information about where that's all happening? So that's another marketing perspective, but those would be, I would suggest ancillary. If you're low on capital, figure out how to fit your way in before getting into this really difficult, volatile industry that is really hard to compete in and stay afloat in.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, this industry, as we all know, is very robust, global, multi-billion-dollar industry, but there's still so much room for growth and opportunity and just expansion. So as we wind down our discussion today, I wanted to jump into final thoughts. Are there any final thoughts that you guys have as panelists in regards to any kind of hot topics you're really looking at for the rest of the year, rest of 2022 in regards to cannabis? Jack, let's start with you.
I'd like to talk about brand building a little bit, but I'm not a marketing guy. I'm a finance and accounting guy, so I'll try and make this as interesting as possible. But cannabis brands are an exciting opportunity, especially for new operators, because they don't require as much capital. You don't have to build out an entire cultivation. You don't have to build out a processing center. The drawback, I mean, every other industry has brands like this. They operate with a partner, a co-packer, a manufacturing partner to actually create the products. The problem is, to succeed as a brand, you have to be able to shell out some advertising dollars. You have to be able to spread awareness, get people familiar with the brand and excited about the brand. And advertising and marketing are non-deductible expenses for a cannabis company. So one of the big measures, what's become a hot topic for our firm particularly, is working with emerging brands to better separate themselves from the cannabis space, to make sure that we're very careful. Again, it's an accounting topic, so maybe not everyone will find this interesting, but to be very careful in terms of maintaining those financial records so that they're recognizing royalty revenue, licensing revenue, revenue from the sale of packaging products, not directly revenue from the sale of cannabis products themselves. And it takes some doing, but we have had some successful examples of brands that are essentially able to entirely divorce themselves from the cannabis production and ownership process, even while they are known increasingly in multiple states as a cannabis brand. And it's an exciting opportunity because you can travel nationwide. I mean, we have a brand that we work with in California. They just signed a licensing deal with Japan. Obviously, you can't ship cannabis products to Japan. You can't even sell cannabis products in Japan. But their brand is being manufactured in Japan as a non-cannabis product. It's gaining market share out there. I think that's an incredibly exciting opportunity. And I'm hopeful that it leads to a wider range of operators in the space that might otherwise have trouble with the intensive capital requirements necessary for production and manufacturing.
Exactly. I would wholeheartedly agree. If we had another hour, I would really talk all about this. I mean, licensing and those opportunities one gives opportunity for more diverse operators to come into the space, not have millions of dollars to build out a cultivation facility, processing facility. I mean, a lot of brands that we know and love today already do this. Wana, for instance, is in almost every state, if not all, but they own 0 licenses. So this is also something that we could maybe have a whole Arcview talk about next time. Jack, any insight into what you're looking at over the next year?
Did
For the
you see
next,
Jack? Oh,
I'm sorry, who were you posing that question to?
Oh, did I say Jack and not John? John. For the rest, see the 3 J's. I was almost to the end, and then you guys.
I'll
John,
yield the floor to,
for the rest. Go
I'm
ahead.
happy to yield the floor to Jack, but no, so some closing thoughts. One, I really enjoyed this panel. I look forward to staying at the bed and breakfast. Hopefully, Jack, we get to do a deal and we get to know, Rebecca, understand your business. I hope we all get to find an opportunity to meet in person sometime. Thanks to Arcview for the opportunity. But really 4 parting thoughts that I think are really important. This is a small industry. And it's really about relationships, right? And I think being authentic and really getting to know people, right? That's what I really just enjoy. Just getting to know people around the country. I think it's very important that people specialize. I think not only in the professional services, so you can really add value, but even in the delivery of services, in the cannabis world, because it is a competitive world. If you're not vertically integrated, you really got to specialize, right? You got to be really, really good at something. And I think, my number one message to everyone is call your congressperson, right? And we've got to be really focused on, the lobbying side of the Safe Banking Act, right? Or the controlled substance. We've got to get action, right? And right now, I think the Congress is focused on trying to, especially in the Senate, because safe banking passed, I think, 6 times in the House. Everyone is focused on, I want everything in one bill and get that. No, just deal with it in piecemeal. Everyone wants safe banking. Get that done. Let's do reform incrementally, and I think we'll move this industry forward in a smart way. So thank you.
Thank you, John. I would also agree with you. Also echo a lot of your final thoughts. Jess, any final thoughts?
yeah, I think what's really one, I agree completely, John, that relationships are so important and necessary in this industry, and also your authenticity and being authentic to your brand and who you are allows you to stand out, right? So I would say that niche marketing around your authenticity and what you offer is going to be so critical to that brand building that Jack talked about. And so like for Copper House, we really center on queer women. That's what our space was designed for. We're trying to create space. And we know that the amount of women in executive presence in cannabis has decreased since 2017. So as we think about the inclusion and diversity piece, really thinking about how we're amplifying thought leadership of women, how we're really supporting women-owned brands, and how you're starting as a woman, like Rebecca, how you center who you are in your own brand and how you show up. So those are the things that I'm always talking about and being a proponent of right now.
Awesome. Well, I would love to thank our awesome 3 J's, our 3 panelists that bring a variety of different perspective in the cannabis space, but just so much knowledge. And thank you to the Arcview crew for getting us all up here today. What a wonderful discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists and our fabulous moderator. And thank you again to our viewers. Over 30,000 of you have joined programs, and since we launched in 2020, we appreciate your support, including sharing your input, like filling out this survey, as we review them and factor them in to planning to bring you the most pressing and important topics in the industry. We're thrilled to announce upcoming in-person events in addition to our webinars. So save the following dates on your calendar: Arcview Access, Queer in Cannabis, June 28th and that's a virtual event next week. The Arcview Cannabis Investment Summit live in New York City, October 19th through the 21st. That will be an in-person event. Arcview Access Web3 and Weed, July 14th, which is a virtual event. And a town hall on the Pacific Northwest, July 21st, also virtual. And then lastly, we have the Arcview Cannabis Investment Summit live in Miami this December in person. With that, we'll close. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you here next time. Thank you.